Yes.
that tape. I think the very important question was asked, if there's a terrorist attack in a certain region,
Right.
could that, have an effect of canceling the election?
Yes.
And his answer to that was no. It depends on the devastation. Let's say, first I have to be upfront and let your listeners know I'm one that don't believe what they tell us about September the 11th.
Yeah.
I'm one that does not believe that this government is such stupid and such idiots that some sheep herders can come in here and do what they tell us they did.
Sir.
So what makes me more suspicious is you read nothing in the major papers about how all the Al-Qaeda, all them, we trained in Fort Benning, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
When they get caught and have to admit that, they say, oh yeah, we trained them for the war in Afghanistan. They will admit they trained bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
You hear a lot of talk now about how they flew bin Laden's relatives out. What they don't tell you is his brother, two brothers. Now they keep saying they're brothers by different mothers, but same daddy. They are the largest commercial real estate folks in Boston, Mass.
In Boston?
Did you hear me?
What?
They give $10 million each year to Harvard and MIT. Now, let me tell you something about Boston. Boston, 67% of all mortgage money in America come out the Boston banks, and 96% of all Texas mortgage money come out the Boston banks. And so consequently, when you stop and think about that, the bin Laden family is the largest commercial real estate owners in the city of Boston. An FBI plane went in there. Now, you hear them talk about all of those Saudis they flew out.
Yes.
But they had a special plane to go in there and take those family members out. An FBI engineered that. Now, the interesting thing is you had 5 of the hijackers was on one plane coming out of Boston.
Oh, true.
And so when you have something, right there, then you don't accuse people, but you have to ask certain questions. And nobody, the American people, been duped into believing that such and such a thing happened. And it didn't happen that way. And so the reason I'm taking this route before I get back to Dick Cheney, that, there's few people that really understand how Hitler came to power. I mean, he lost the first election by 6 million votes. And when he came back and won the next time, he won by 1 vote. You can't win an election by 1 vote. That's stealing. And so consequently, he burnt Congress down to the ground. Well, we didn't know that when it happened. It's 50 years before we know that Hitler and the Nazis burnt the Reichstag down, which was Congress. And they said the communists did it. Well, back then, when you said the communists did it, you thought of Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a Jew. So when you say the communists did it back then, that was the code word for saying the Jews did it.
Mm-hmm.
When you say New York Liberal Press, that's the code word for the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, if you look at the parallel of September the 11th and look at the parallel of Congress being burnt down, and you look at the horror and the fear that they was able to create in Germany, before they could do the things they wanted to do, they had to frighten the German people.
Absolutely.
And so consequently now, I know this country. I forced them through the courts, and they had to release documents that they are involved in weather modification.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. Now, I keep asking myself every time there's an earthquake, it's always in places with people we don't like. China, Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan.
Iran had that huge one.
Yes. Now, assuming that we have perfected weather modification that good, and right before this election, we can manipulate in California, boom, boom. That's a local, but it's big enough national to cancel the election, to suspend. Now, we wouldn't say that it was created by terrorists. but we would just say that this is such a horrible thing, tragedy, that the elections will be canceled. I don't think you could use that to suspend the Constitution and declare martial law. What you could use to declare martial law, if you had, they keep telling us that rockets, if you ever done international travel, you can't slip nothing past the duty-free shop. Maybe that's what we need to let take over security. I mean, and the duty-free shop will deliver your package to you before the plane take off. Now, if they can have that rigid procedure for some cigarettes that will cause cancer and some whiskey that make a fool out of you, then how come we don't go to them and say, look, could you handle our security? And so consequently, they're telling us now that these surface-to-air missiles that you can hand carry.
Yes.
They telling us, listen, we have satellites up there that if you had a gnat on your back, that satellite could pick it up.
Yep.
If you growing peaches in your backyard, your peaches get a fungus, that satellite can pick it up. And so all at once now, we have the Predator dome that is so incredibly, there's nothing you can do that thing can't pick up. So when they tell us that somebody could slip in this country with missiles, they just planting that in our head. So suppose 3 days before the election, 5 planes were shot down.
Mm-hmm.
And we blamed it on the terrorists. I think that would create the type of horror that you could suspend the Constitution and set up martial law. Or if there's an attack on the Olympics and, a whole lot of people's wiped out, or if the Democrat or the Republican is hit, or either one. Mm-hmm. And so, when you sit and you have as much stuff going on, and the American people don't know about it, and we keep getting duped about it. And so, in listening to Dick Cheney's interview, I think the only thing right now that we have going for us is the military. And what I mean by that is the military, those hardcore career military people, they survive because they pimp all the contracts. Mm-hmm. If there's a Cold War, let me just say something that, if you and I want to be fighter pilots, okay, that means we have to learn how to shoot down enemy planes. Now, the first time you shoot that enemy plane, you can't be at war. So they got these little simulations that you use, and then at certain times you have to have the hardcore experience. Boeing Aircraft sells those planes at $38 million a shot. And let's use them one time. Now, who gets the kickback on a good, juicy contract like that? Who gets the food contract? Not just war. We have the same amount of soldiers, in the military without a war. Now, the war, that's just extra gravy. And they get those contracts go to their friends. Well, we got Halliburton coming in now, and you got some generals that is mad. And I think that, whoever thought we'd see the day that we'd have to look back to that group of thugs to protect us, not for good reasons, just because, that breast full of milk, they're not able to suck on it. And so consequently, for those that's listening who believe this government, then what I'm saying is not making sense. It happened in Germany. I mean, now we look back at history. I mean, if we look at what happened in Japan with World War II, they had to admit that the FBI cracked. They claimed the Japanese Blue Code was the most rigid code in the history of planet Earth. And they had to admit that we cracked that Blue Code 18 months before the war. Mm-hmm. So when we broke into the Japanese embassy in Washington, D.C. On Pearl Harbor Day and got all their records, we found out that they had sent a message 18 months before, about 12 months before, is the exact date that we So if we had already cracked that code,
Right.
we knew the exact day Pearl Harbor would hit.
Yes.
Now let's think about something. You know, it's the first time in the history a whole fleet was parked and everybody had shore leave. Nobody was watching. And then you got to ask another question. You know, there's a lot of ocean out there, but ships cannot use the whole ocean. Ships have a corridor just like we have with highways. And so, you know, we're the only country that had B-52 that could fly from here to Japan and back. The Japanese didn't have it, so they had to come over on aircraft carriers. You mean to tell me none of those ships that's passing in that corridor didn't see those Japanese coming this way?
Very good. Wow. Now that is a fantastic point. Those O's were not flying all the way from Japan.
Yes.
On the line, darlings, Dick Gregory. You see? Oh, my God, he is such a genie. The website is www.dickgregory.com. We got to take a short break. We're going to pick it up where we left off and keep humming, darlings. Thanks for being up late. He is a prolific author. He is a health researcher. He is a truth researcher. He is a warrior in the best sense, fighting for your mind and for your sanity and for, you know, the distribution of truth and letting it stick. And I'm telling you, man, the kind of ways that this man spends reality, woo! It is just so fantastic. We really, really appreciate you being here, Mr. Gregory. You know, when you were talking about weather modification, California around a month ago had a 5.6 earthquake that supposedly hit off the coast of San Diego. Mm-hmm. When I read the early news reports, it said that Caltech first registered the epicenter of the earthquake out in Lancaster at Edwards Air Force Base. So I called Caltech, and I asked him, how is it that you had this epicenter registered out in Lancaster, but then you switched and said, oh, no, it happened off, you know, a sea shelf out off in the Pacific Ocean. They're like, oh, yeah, it's our computer system, very, you know, curt with me, very short. Yeah, it's our computer system. It just malfunctioned a little bit. And I do not really believe that Caltech wastes a lot of money on this such sensitive items, such sensitive technology. That's what they're there for, Caltech, earthquakes. And what, they have something that would locate it 100 miles? I mean, Lancaster, it's over like 200 or 300 miles away from the epicenter that was out in the ocean. Yes. And so when you were talking about weather modification and things, it really smelt like that somehow they have some kind of wave generator somewhere that helps move the plates or something.
Yeah, and the average American person are so busy trying to feed the family and stay ahead of the rat race. But you must remember, even when you win the rat race, you're still a rat. and so consequently, when you have, and I can understand the American people, because when you have a system that's being duped by people who have a multi-billion-dollar kitty to dupe you with, then it's not hard to find out how they can get by with it. The only thing we can say now is, thank God, we living in the age of Aquarius as of May the 5th, the year 2000, and that means for 6,000 years this world have been ruled by darkness, and now we have light. And so they have no control over that. And the one great thing about us, the one great thing about a show like this, that when you understand that one, and I try to teach my grandchildren that I said, you know, when you look up in the sky, especially on a night of the full moon, and you see that big, gorgeous moon glowing up there, it's hard to believe that the moon is a dark planet. There is no light on the moon. What you see is a reflection from the sun.
Yes.
Now, that takes on two things, which I didn't mean to get into, but since we talk about that, then I'll come back and tell you why I brought up the reflection of the moon.
Right.
When they told us they landed on the moon, they showed us pictures, and there were shadows. There are no shadows on the moon. It's dark. That's impossible.
Even with the sun shining on, I mean, what it implied is that they were sitting in the bright side, the planet, the part of the moon that's facing the moon. I mean,
No,
facing the
that's the
sun.
reflection we see down here.
Right, the reflection we see. Right.
That's a whole big difference with you right there.
Ah.
And so consequently, even when you saw the foot hit the ground and they say one step above and one step from mankind, and you saw that dust fly up and come back, there is no gravity on the moon.
So
And
that
when
dust would have kept going.
And when you saw that flag waving, there is no air on the moon. It is impossible for that American flag to be waving.
There's no atmosphere. There's nothing.
Nothing. No, let me just move out of that for a minute. The sun reflects, and that's what you see on the moon. The moon has no power. We as human beings have no power. What you see us is a reflection from that universal force that reflects on us and show our light. And so when we think about Queen Elizabeth, the United States government, none of these governments have no more power than you when you understand that all you're looking at is a reflection.
Interesting.
And so once you understand that, and then you don't have to be frightened of that whole insanity, and realize that, I mean, you could not, in racial proportion, you could not have a technology advance as Hitler and them Germans had for before World War II. And look what happened to them. Because of their arrogance, because they thought that they was bigger than the universal God force, and there was always a handful of people. I mean, we hate to admit and talk about there were Germans that did everything they could to stop it. They killed them. They're known as the White Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, you know, those of us who choose to sit by at this time of crisis, I just say have fun and have fun quick, because recess is just about over. And so consequently, there was a whole lot of Germans that understood the power of Nazi Germany and never thought there would be a day that their loved ones would be bombed out. And so to get back to the whole Cheney piece,
Could
yes.
I just add that at the beginning, when I went to Germany a year and a half ago and got some interesting materials from one of the torture chambers that they unearthed in East Berlin, and
Yes.
in it was highlighting that besides the communists that were the first to die, all the infirmed, they showed pictures of Germans with tags on them in the streets, and other Germans would come by and whack them in the head. A lot of they exterminated a lot of Germans too, and the communists went, and just Germans that weren't up to physical snuff, and the elderly were also eliminated.
Well, now think about one thing. If Hitler was talking about creating an Aryan super race, right?
Right.
So you have to ask yourself a question. Is a super race a race with no Jews or a race with no misfits? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you got rid of all the Jews, I don't mean kill them, you just got them out the country. What are you doing with those misfits that's breeding?
Right.
So that's what that was about.
But they were the first ones to go. The communists and Germans were the first
Yes.
ones to die.
Yes, this is, and the same thing's going to happen here.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, and the homosexuals.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
Germany.
exactly.
I mean,
They weren't breeding.
Oh God, I mean,
You
Hitler.
bet.
I mean, they did a thing on homosexuals, which I think they're going to do the same thing here, and I think that's why they say, well, if we do greed, we can get them to register. So they said, if me and you was living together, and you had a government job, I can't share in your benefits. But if you and my sister was living together, y'all could. Well, it's something wrong with you being that liberal and hip that you can do it for a man and a woman and a woman, but you can't do it for a man and a woman. They just get names and addresses. And one day, what they call the Black Mirage will show up and say, come on, I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't deal in hope. You know, I deal in mindset.
Yes.
And if you look at the mindset in America today, it's set with fear.
Yes.
I mean, why, if the Pentagon do all kind of stuff every day, and the CIA and the FBI, and they classify it. So we don't hear about it.
Right.
Then why would they tell us about a terrorist threat? Why would they say, oh, we just got a tape, and then they tell us what they said on the tape, and then say the CIA is checking the tape for its authenticity?
Exactly.
Well, why don't you check that first? You know? And then they say, well, we know that they're thinking to do something because we can hear the chatter. Well, how can you be that smart to slip past the greatest, mightiest nation in the history of the planet, but dumb enough to keep chatting?
Right.
And so, but that's the fear tactics
Yeah.
they use to scare. You see, a scared nation works the same way as scared people. When you become frightened, you tear up your immune system. You eat up the liver and the kidneys, and then you die a horrible death. And so, consequently, you know, the mindset. You know, it's an interesting story, and it's a true story. A woman had cancer so bad, the doctor said she could just survive another 6 weeks. And he said, let me tell you what we're going to do. Rather than have you in the hospital, we can't save you. I'm going to let you go home so you can kind of get your business straight. And I'll give you a heavy doses of morphine to deal with the pain. She went home. A friend of hers said, let me tell you, there is a place in Mexico. You can go there. They give you coffee enemas. They give you Laetrile. They give you herbs and vitamins.
Yes.
And she went there and got totally cured. She bumps into the doctor about 18 months later, and the doctor is like, oh, Mildred, oh, my God, I thought you was dead. What happened? And she told her. This friend of mine told me about this clinic in Mexico where you take coffee enemas and Laetrile and herbs and vitamins, and I went down, got cured, and the doctor said, come on, that stuff don't work. And 3 weeks later, she was dead.
What?
That's the mindset. That's what happens when you put it in your mind.
Oh, no.
And these folks understand that. You see,
Yes.
they have $1 billion kitty to do things that we think is normal. For instance, I don't know what effect that all those shootouts in them schools had
Right.
on the mindset. But let me tell you what was wrong with those shootouts. They wasn't little poor, roustabout, slow-learning, bully, athlete white folks.
True.
These was the top of the line, not from broken homes. Some of them, mother and father, had PhDs. All of them were good students. And when they interviewed folks, they told them, wow, let me tell you, this just caught us by surprise. They were so nice. So now let's take, you know, the type of income these families had, the type of home life, good students, all of them known was going to go to college. And for some reason, every other week, this group of white folks from this kind of set and background just go to school and want to wipe out the whole class. I keep saying, wait a minute. One time, that's okay. But week after week after week. And then you know what's strange? After September the 11th, there haven't been another school wipeout. So I say, now, what is it that they know that they can get the mind ready, which we are innocent because we don't know? For instance, if you take Columbine, right?
Yeah.
Now, a funny thing happened that morning. When they called 911 for 30 minutes, 911 was busy. But the police was there within 2 minutes after the first shooting, and nobody explained how they knew.
Yep.
Now, they showed pictures the next week. They showed pictures of them two guys rehearsing. Video. They showed them in the school rehearsing like a dry run. Mm-hmm. So when you see that, you say, wow, Jesus. So that helps convince my grandmother. What they didn't tell us is the teacher that died, and by the way, he died from a gunshot wound to the shoulder. And so they deliberately let him bleed to death. But he was also the art director and over the video class. And they said to these youngsters, you know, we getting a federal grant, and they want us, we so honored our school was picked. They want us to do a videotape of some young folk going crazy and want to blow up the whole school. And they gave those two guys the assignment. They had a script.
What?
And they was videoing this, and they think this is going to go and help other high schools avert these type of disasters, never knowing that they were going to release this as more evidence to convince everybody that this went down like they said.
Wow.
Now, let's look at something else. Let's say, for instance, that they're going to accuse you of walking in a fire station, throwing a bomb and killing everybody in there, and you get killed in the process of doing that, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what happens is you get up in the morning like you normally do, and all at once you are kidnapped. They have a look-alike that looks like you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That walks into my grandmother's diner. Now, I'm not talking about Dick Gregory. I'm talking about John Doe Citizen.
Yeah.
And so this look-alike walks in and asks, can I use your ladies' room, and I'd like change for $100. And I need it real quick because I'm trying to catch this bus. And they said, well, we don't have public toilets except for our customers. So you cuss her out, okay? Call her all kind of dirty names. If I had the time, I'd blow this damn place up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fire station get blowed up, people dead, and then all at once they find your body. And now you running all over the world. My grandmother, who runs this diner, see your picture.
Mm-hmm.
She gets in touch with the police. Now, they got my honest grandmother, okay, who ain't never told a lie in her life, on TV saying, you came into the diner, and you had an attitude, and you was talking about blowing up the diner. Who wouldn't believe you did this? Because nobody understands how deep conspiracies run and how they plan 3 and 4 years in advance, and all at once, here you are. And so consequently, when you stop and think about how they can do this when you are in control of the situation.
Yes.
When we had the Oklahoma bombing,
Yes.
the news day in New York, for those of y'all that keep records, April the 22nd, 1995.
Yes.
A front page story. Oklahoma City bombing. Blast theory. 2 events recorded as manhunt continues.
Yep.
And they go on to talk about how Charlie Minkins at the University of Oklahoma, which is 30 miles away, he ran the seismograph. He gave them the tape.
Oh, no.
They ran the tape on the front page. No other paper picked it up. First blast at 9:02.4 a.m. Second blast at 9:02.14. And then it's so sensitive, it showed a train passing by at 9:02. You know,
Wow.
4 seconds before. So this picked it up.
Yes.
No paper ran this. How can this run in New York City and no paper run it? You heard the story of the FBI informant, Mary Howell?
Oh, yes.
Okay, here's a white woman that's an FBI informant. She told the FBI, like 6 months before the bombing, what had happened and what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a code number, and she had infiltrated this group, and they put her under special, her code number was C1-183, and she was hired by alcohol and tobacco. And after it happened, she tried to say, wait a minute, I told you all, and they put her on trial. And had she just not had some lawyers, and they were right-wing, the right wing know about the conspiracy, what's going down, they're scared to say anything because they know they'll get wiped out. But they the ones sent the lawyers in. And so when you stop and think about, every now and then something do happen that kind of throws light on things. For instance, in the November election, Tuesday, November the 3rd, 1988.
Hey, Mr. Gregory, darling,
Yes.
may we do this quick break and come and pick it
Sure.
right back up, darlings?
Yes.
On the line, Dick Gregory. You know we want to follow this thread, so we're going to take a quick break to the
What I
election.
want to show you is there are universal forces that just change stuff. On the November the 3rd election, all the way across the country, Congress, governors, 1998, there was an incident, and let me kind of set the path for you. If you have a car if your house is hit by a Boeing aircraft engine fall off at midnight on Sunday,
Okay.
and Boeing has a press conference on Monday, that one will not run until Tuesday morning. Because it happened at midnight. The papers is already out for Monday. The press conference is Monday, so it goes in Tuesday's paper about an incident that happened Sunday, okay?
Okay.
Now, on ABC was getting ready for Monday night football, okay? And unbeknownst to the folks, they had a labor dispute, and they was going to lock them out, okay?
Yes.
And they know when they got locked out that most of the folks would not cross the picket line, okay?
Yes.
And so they posted on their website on Sunday night, complete election returns for Tuesday's election. Well, somebody made a mistake and hit the switch. So over the air on ABC website, they given the complete total election return. Now, for those of y'all that want to check out, you get the Atlanta Constitution, the Atlanta Journal, Tuesday, November the 3rd, 1998. And here's the front page headlines. ABC posts election results before the vote. And they go on to say ABC was hit with an online disaster on the eve of today's election when its internet site displayed complete election results hours before the first vote was cast.
Crazy.
And they go on to say ABC News, the message said, 36 governorships are at stake today, along with 34 Senate seats and all 435 seats in the House. Voters also are elected thousands of state legislators. The ABC website reported complete, listen now, results for every governorship, House and Senate race, and appeared to have most close races won by the Democrats. Now, what did I just say? I just said we have a system in this country where it makes no difference about your vote. This is already manipulated. It's called Election Central, and it's at Rockefeller Center, and it's the CIA trunk. And so that's why the big fight is on now, where people are saying, wait a minute, I want to have a receipt.
Yes.
And the guy who invented this new voting machine, which has the receipts that everybody's asking about 6 months ago, he died mysteriously. And so when you stop and think about, what happens, we call this a free democratic society, but you better go back to the preamble. This is a republic.
Mm-hmm.
It has never been a democratic. This is a Democrat is everybody participates. A republic is only the elite aristocrats who know what the masses of the people need because they don't know. And that's what this has always been about.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, when you look at when this country falls, and at the rate it's going, it will, here's who you blame for it. You blame the police, not all of them. You blame the news media, not all of them. And you blame the politicians. What I mean by that, the cops know what went down. Not every cop, not every FBI agent. They know what really happened.
With which event, sir?
September.
Yes.
What happened in Oklahoma.
Yes.
What happened in these school shootings. They know.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all the cops. And you got politicians that know what has happened, but they're so scared that if they say anything, they would die. These are the folks that's going to be the cause. And you got press. You know, when you come into Kennedy Airport in New York, the number one most powerful nation in the world, people flying from all over the world, how many of them cab drivers do you think are government agents? I mean, you think most of them are just ordinary cab drivers. So we got government agents driving cabs, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, in Washington, D.C., in major cities. How many government agents do you think work for the Washington Post and the L.A. Times and all your major newspapers? So when you think you running Dick Boone's story, you don't know that's a story written by FBI or CIA or Defense Intelligence.
Absolutely, sir.
In a free democratic society, there should be a rigid law against having agencies who have a vested interest working for the press, because they take ordinary people like me and you, and they'll do articles, you know, and nobody will suspect those articles is just aimed at us. And so consequently, you know, there was a, where was that? There was a, in Kuwait, there was a group of soldiers from Fort Riley, Kansas. And in that group was Timothy McVeigh.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was in the hospital over there, some kind of way they just went unconscious. And the next thing, they woke up in the hospital, and Kuwaiti nurse said, "Yo, get out of here, get out of here." They put microchips up your rectum. When McVeigh came back home and was telling friends what had happened and how strange it happened, only one paper, that old conservative Washington Times, for those of y'all to keep records, Monday, April the 23rd, 1995, suspect fond of firepower, weary of government, told acquaintance U.S. had planted microchips in his behind. Well, you know, my grandmother reads that, and she just thinks the boy was stupid. And so when you stop and think about how they can modify, behave, especially with service people,
yes,
and you get one story, and altogether you think you're reading one thing and it's something else. For instance, when the whole Nicole Simpson, Ron Goldman thing went down,
right,
the press asked Nicole Simpson's mother, when was the last time you talked to your daughter? She said 11 o'clock last night. I said, well, how you know this precise time? She said, we and my husband had dinner in a restaurant that was an hour and a half away from our house. We left the restaurant at 9:30. We couldn't have got back home before 11. 11 don't fit the pattern. And so consequently, those files is locked up in Bell Telephone Special Office in Texas. There's a couple of lawsuits they're trying to get them to open up. Now, if we remember when they told us Nicole Simpson put up a hell of a fight because she had skin under her fingernails.
right,
Well, when the pathologist checked the fingernails and found out the skin was white and the blood wasn't no J's, they was getting ready to hold a press conference the next day. All four of them was murdered.
Who? Hold it. All four who?
All four of the pathologists. Now, wait, we've been holding now. Not once did the L.A. Times run this story. Those of y'all that do that, it was in the Miami Herald, page 3A, Thursday, July the 20th, 1995. And it says, from the Herald Wire Service. headlines. 4 L.A. city employees killed. Okay, now, you got to read all the way down to paragraph 6 before it tells you the Piper lab contained the crime lab made famous in the O.J. Simpson murder case.
Wow.
Okay, now, at no time, if you don't live in L.A. and you read this, what would make you read it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Right.
And then they just say a worker shot and killed 4 city employees. Well, if you're a pathologist, you're city employees.
Wow.
Wednesday, in a rampage through the fortress-like center that housed the L.A. Police Science Lab.
He went within the L.A. architecture, within the building, tons of cops all around.
Did you hear me, dear lady?
I think I did.
And nobody in L.A. ran this story. And when they run the story, the headline don't reflect. And until you read all the way down to paragraph 6. And so when you think you live in a free democratic society where they can manipulate the press like that, then it's very difficult to come and say, hey, look, if you check out September the 11th in New York City, there's a seismograph machine at Columbia University.
That's right, sir.
And they recorded 2 explosions. Now, that seismograph machine wouldn't record an airplane hitting the building. Okay, but it will record 2 explosions. And it did. Now, if I know that, don't tell me the September the 11th people who's investigating that don't know this. And so consequently, when you stop and think about, what they telling us and the small amount of information, for instance.
You know what, Mr. Gregory, sir?
Yes.
We are at the end of this first hour, so we'll pick it right up in the second hour, sir, on September 11th. And boy, how they are just putting it right in front of our faces.
Yeah.
It's like the information is out there, but it just takes the work getting off the gerbil wheel to find it. Thank you, sir. Dick Gregory's website is www.dickgregory.com. We will be back. Second hour of Radio Alchemy on KPFK 90.7 FM, Los Angeles. Welcome back to the second hour of Radio Alchemy on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara County. And we're just jumping back into the second hour because on the lines is Dick Gregory. Do I need to say more? I know you late night listeners understand the magnitude of these words and the magnitude of this mind that for decades now has been synthesizing some of the hardest information, just some of the most tragic things about this human species, man, and trying to get it into a nice morsel for you to understand what this game is all about. And so it is an honor to have him on. We are going to play another very short clip. It's around 3 minutes. It's another part of the interview done with Dick and Lynn Cheney at their Naval Observatory house. And something that's very interesting about their house is that starting in December of 2002, every day for the continual 11 months from December 2002 to November 2003, their neighbors were complaining that there were 2 to 3 explosions per day because there was classified construction going on at his home out in Washington, D.C. Some people have speculated that he is building a bunker. Others think it's a heliopad. I doubt it's a heliopad because you're building a heliopad above ground, not, demolishing underground. Others think that he is tunneling under the embassies that are nearby for espionage. And then some people are just thinking that he's building oil derricks, just way for him to plug in and see his money pump up right in front of his house. But Dick is up to something. And so let's listen to Lynn and Dick as they discuss with a C-SPAN interviewer. Here we go.
Steve, can I just go back?
C-SPAN. Very interesting stuff. I want to read this from the Department of Homeland Security releases summary conclusions from the national exercise. Top-Off, TOPOFF2, was conducted from May 12 to May 16, 2003, and involved federal, state, local, and Canadian participants in a full-scale exercise that assessed how responders, leaders, and other authorities would react to the simulated release of weapons of mass destruction in 2 U.S. cities, Seattle, Washington, and Chicago, Illinois. The exercise scenario depicted a fictitious foreign terrorist organization that detonated a simulated radiological dispersal device, or a dirty bomb, in Seattle and released the pneumonic plague in several Chicago metropolitan area locations. There was also significant pre-exercise intelligence play, a cyber attack, and credible terrorism threats against other locations. And then it goes on to talk about the specific goals, talk about the readiness, talking about who was involved, which is they tried to involve practically all members of Congress. And what's interesting about this, Mr. Gregory, which I'd like to get your opinion on, is that they are talking about this terrorist attack, and of course, what Dick Cheney said about the America not losing or the terrorists winning. He didn't say anything about sustaining democracy and our liberal freedoms. He said maintaining the economy. Go out there and spend. He didn't say anything about the welfare and us looking out for you. Yes, we're safe, but they're getting better at it. I mean, just the schizophrenia that they're kind of spinning out there. What I wanted to ask you about is, it seems that with this notion of them updating the Constitution around the continuity of government, there was a bill that just got defeated, mostly by the Liberty Committee, which would have made, if a significant number of House representatives was killed, that the surviving members of the Senate and House the Senate could go ahead and just appoint whoever they wanted to the House instead of having a special election. And so I'm wondering if this next terrorist attack, what they're thinking about is, in a sense, just a change of government, that they would, in a sense, be able to kill off congressional members. And luckily that bill failed, but it doesn't mean that they won't try it again.
Sure.
Do you think that this terrorism has to do with trying to, in a sense, force a change in government? Because there's just so much around the continuity of government.
Sure.
And, and things to that effect.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But let me just, before I get into that, for those of y'all to keep records, the Washington Times, Wednesday, April the 22nd, 1998, page 5A. FBI paid mortgage on Terry Nichols' home.
Yes.
The FBI made mortgage payments on Terry Nichols' home after he was arrested for conspiring to blow up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Court documents show a Justice Department spokeswoman said she did not know immediately why the government made the mortgage payments nor how much. Now, this is what I'm saying, that the American people is so duped. At that time, that was the most hideous act of terrorism in the history of America. And here's a man that was arrested for being part of that, and we paying his mortgage.
And also, there's this a media woman, her name is Jana Davis, out in Oklahoma. She has just come out with a book called The Third Terrorist, and what she is tracing back, I believe, is either Iraqis or Al-Qaeda was that third unidentified John Doe, and she's linking it back to Iraq.
Well, you can look at that and know that's a lie. That goes again to who's writing the book. I'm going to get the book because I'd like to know if she's also talking about that film that the CIA had, and that showed other people involved.
Right.
Now, she can't know that much about something and not know that.
Yes.
And so when you start looking to see if that's the part. But to get back to your question about, yes, they're trying to create a fear that and that will go into martial law. It's kind of interesting when you mentioned the naval house, the ex-naval house where the vice president lives.
Right, yes.
Well, you see, before Nelson Rockefeller was vice president, the vice president didn't have a house. Are you aware of that?
Right. They just lived in a regular private
Regular
house.
apartment.
Yeah.
Now, then they decided that they would have a special house. This is Rockefeller, one of the richest men in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was strange how he got to be president.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Agnew got ran out, so Nixon appointed Gerald Ford, who was the CIA, FBI's cover-up person on the Warren Committee.
Mm-hmm.
So he thought he was being rewarded by becoming, they're going to make him president. He didn't know they were setting him up to kill him. And so consequently, he became vice president. Then Nixon stepped down, and he became president. Now, who did he pick? He's a little redneck, no money, didn't know who his mama was, his daddy was, raised in a boys' home, little right-wing conservative chump out of a little town in Michigan, becomes a congressman, and he picks one of the richest people in the world, who Rockefeller could go out one night for dinner and spend more money at the dinner party than he was making 5 years. Now, that's his vice president. Now, hear me good now. They decided that the vice president was going to live in a special home, so they was redoing the naval place for the vice president, which was Nelson Rockefeller. The day Rockefeller was supposed to move in, he said no, he didn't want to move in. You know what happened that day? That's the day that they shot at Gerald Ford in San Francisco. And had they killed him like they were supposed to, then Rockefeller wouldn't have had to move in there because he'd go right directly to the White House. But they didn't kill him. Then think about, had they killed him like they were supposed to, we would have a president of the United States named Nelson Rockefeller that was the vice president and the president and hadn't received one vote from the American people.
Yep.
Is that kind of... And so, you know, where they get by with it is they plot and scheme, and what you see go down now, this stuff happened, it went in motion 10 years. I think September the 9th, the 11th was supposed to happen under the Rockefeller watch, but it didn't happen. And so then they had to retool up and redo it again. If you remember, on September the 11th, there was a lot of people from the, what they call it, the Port Authority.
Okay.
Police. Now, why would the Port Authority police die in September the 11th? What's that about? Well, the Port Authority handles state buildings. And the Port Authority, they was handling the Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark, all the airports, and the bus station and the train station. Now, had a bomb going off at the Waldorf, or one of those huge buildings like them, but the Port Authority, that's not their authority. So the Port Authority was there because that's a state building, except something's wrong. The Rockefeller brothers engineered the whole mastermind behind the World Trade Building. Governor Rockefeller ran the bill through to build it. See, they said that area had not recovered economically since the Great Depression. So they're going to put this building there and this whole complex and change the economics. So they floated the bond issue through the Chase Manhattan Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 2 months before the World Trade Building was blown up, that building was sold.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. How do you sell a state building without a bid and without letting the people in the state know it's being sold? And do you realize if my father or my son was killed in that building as a Port Authority, you ain't seen the lawsuit I would put in, because the fact that that was privately owned, the Port Authority had no business being in there. But even they didn't know. For those of y'all that do your homework, it was sold to Larry Silverstein.
Yep.
And if you pull up this paper here, the Daily News, Saturday, February the 16th, 2000 and see in a minute, 2000 and I hope I didn't cut off. I did. So it must have been 2003.
Yes.
February, no, 2004.
Okay.
And here's what happened. He's in court now because not only did he buy those buildings without a bid and without New York people knowing he bought it, he insured each building for triple terrorism insurance.
Yes.
And the insurance company said, wait a minute, hold it. We're not paying you. If we pay you what you want, what you think you're supposed to get, you would make $7.5 billion profit. So a lot of the news came out. The headline news is World Trade landlord to get $365 million from two insurance companies. World Trade Center landlord Larry Silverstein settled with two insurance companies yesterday concerning the underwriter policy of the Twin Towers collapse. And so you got to ask yourself a question. How is it the people of New York did not know that this state building was being sold 2 months before September the 9th?
Absolutely.
The 11th. Now, you know, in June the 19th of 2001, there were some government agencies that decided they was going to hold a drill. NARAD, the FBI, the CIA, Defense Department. But they say now, all the other agencies, we're not going to tell anything about. We're just going to see how they function. So June the 19th, they decided they would have a dry run on September the 11th. And so September the 11th, when the FAA saw these planes leaving their flight pattern, they get in touch with NARAD, and NARAD didn't scramble no planes because they knew it was an exercise. Mm-hmm. So you got to ask yourself, under the false pretense of leading everybody to think it was an exercise, that's when they pulled this off. That's why no planes were scrambled. Now, the only paper that you can find this in is Monday, April the 19th, 2004, front page of USA Today. NARAD had drills earlier, like September the 11th.
That's right.
And you know, and that really don't come right out and say, hey, the day that all this was happening. And so a lot of papers start printing stuff after something, and you don't get the connect. Like the New York Times, Tuesday, February the 24th, 2004, front page. CIA was given data on skyjacker long before September the 9th. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute, Jesus. How come the September the 11th committee didn't come up with this? This is in the New York Times this year, and in the Washington Post, March the 2nd, 2002.
Well, you know...
Page A11. Listen to this. Airport screen 9 of September the 11th skyjackers. Officials say it. And they go on to talk about how 30 minutes before them flights took off, they pulled 9 of them skyjackers off the plane, searched their bags and luggage and them for bombs or guns. Now, how do you pull 9 people off planes and still let them planes take off at 30 minutes before? And then when you look around and you don't see that all these people that's investigating have any of this information. Kathy Hughes, who owns Radio 1,
yes,
she and I used to do a radio show together. It was wild. It was outrageous.
Yeah. On
August the 19th, I did a whole show with her. That was the August that Princess Di was killed. And I started the show, I said, Kathy, I'm in love with a white woman. She said, what? I said, Queen Elizabeth. She said, does she know it? I said, no, but every time I go to Buckingham Palace and wave, a hand waved back to me, but it looked like a man's hand, but a woman's motion. Well, that's how long ago we were talking about Prince Charles was gay. And the whole marriage was because he had to create a son to inherit the throne one day.
Absolutely.
And so now what happens is this This guy writes her on April the 12th, 2002. Dear Miss Hughes, thank you for responding to my letter. I am aware of Brother Gregory's website. Now, let me skip down to paragraph 4. I was at a speech back in the late 70s when Dick told the audience that they were getting ready to blow up the World Trade Center. Now, people ask me, how do you know? Well, if y'all remember, and you remember this because it made worldwide news.
Right.
One day they arrested a guy dressed like Spider-Man on some cables. Remember that story?
Yes, I remember you told us about him
walking from one World Trade building to another.
And who can do that?
Those two are the tallest buildings in the world.
Absolutely.
And, a stunt man can walk a cable, but to put a cable from one World Trade building to the other, that's serious engineering.
Absolutely.
And with the FBI, the CIA, alcohol and tobacco, and $20 billion worth of gold, or $40 billion worth of gold bullion 20 feet below one of them buildings, you got all kind of security. Nobody saw it. So that's how I knew that couldn't nobody put that together but the government.
And I want to say also that when the FAA audio came out, you distinctively heard an FAA air traffic controller, once they heard the planes were going off course, etc. You heard him, and this is an amazing, I guess NPR had this clip. The only clip they played was him saying, is this real, or is this a...
exercise.
Yeah, an exercise.
Yep.
He actually said that.
I heard that, and the reason I paid attention here because I knew, what the trick was.
Right.
But here's something that's very interesting. On October the 24th, 2002, this story ran. That the story ran October 2002. It was this story, but it said on April the 24th. 2001, the Baltimore Sun, the newspaper, and ABC News reported on a shocking, declassified Pentagon document titled Operation Northwood.
Oh, yes.
In Operation Northwood, they was talking about how they was going to skyjack planes, how they was going to use snipers.
Right, James Banford's book, Body of Secrets. Yeah, completely.
Does he have that in there?
That out. I'm sorry, sir?
That's in his book.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in his book.
I love it. I have to get that. Is that in all the stores?
Oh, yeah, James Banford, Body of Secrets. Absolutely.
Okay,
that's
I will
who
get
unearthed.
That tomorrow.
Absolutely, sir. Let's say that we are going to a quick break, darlings. On the line, Dick Gregory, weaving the tapestry for you in this late night. Thank you for being here. And him in Washington, D.C. It's so fantastic, him hanging out late with us all. And he was putting together some of those pieces of the puzzle that were September 11th. But the great things that have come out that Dick Gregory has unearthed is the idea that the planes were not scrambled because they thought it was Memorex. They thought that it was an exercise. And you clearly heard the FAA person talking about that. And also this war, this clash of civilizations, that's why I played for you guys this Midge Decter clip where she is talking about the Vatican, and all Western nations are very concerned about the birth rates of Muslims versus the birth rate of Western civilizations, and that we would be overrun. So why not just go over there and cause some death? Now that is what Dick Gregory said and saw, so that's why it is fantastic to always have him on, because he gets sensations and amazing information from so many different sources. But for the rest of the time, Mr. Gregory, I want to talk to you about the future going into this election, because what I kind of heard in what Dick was saying, Dick and Lynn were talking about here, is that could it be then, when they're talking about a section of the country being disrupted by some kind of attack,
yes.
Couldn't it be that maybe they see the vote tally going up on their little computer database? Wouldn't that be one of these swing states, one of these states, even if they want to blow California off and all of the electoral votes that we have here? I mean, yes. I don't know how they could swing it, Republican, but couldn't they go to a swing state, fake or do their terrorist attack there, and just once again flip that electoral college percentage in Bush's favor. I mean, I think it's interesting that it won't affect the whole U.S., but it seems very, handy that that all it takes is maybe a particular state to do it.
Yeah, but see, one of the problems is a sweet, kind, ethical soul like you cannot begin to think with the devious, ungodly, unspiritual mind that they do. So the most you can do is say, let's look at some projections, but you can't pinpoint because you would never be willing to kill your mother. Okay, they are. I mean, this group of thugs, they have no. I mean, I know that AIDS was created at Case Western Institute. I told a friend of mine today, I was just playing with on the floor, I said, Punch, he loves the computer, right?
Yeah.
I said, punch up on your computer, Case Western Institute's simian monkey SV40 and see what happened. Because, see, back then, before we called it AIDS, the code word was SV40. If you punch up in your computer SV40, Case Western Institute, you'd be surprised what rolls off. and so consequently, we cannot even think with the devious mind that they have. Let me just give you two examples and we get back to your question.
Yes.
For those of you all that keep records, if you get the New York Daily News, Thursday, May the 29th, 1997, article says, crime linked to pollution. Polluted water can cause brain damage that turns ordinary people into violent criminals. A researcher says, who is the researcher? Roger Masters of Dartmouth College in Andover, New Hampshire, compared crime figures from the FBI with information on industrial discharge, lead, and manganese. Now, until I talked to him now and got all his research, but I didn't know that the FBI kept files on crime that's caused from industrial pollution. He found a link between pollution levels and murder, assault, and robbery.
Oh, my God.
Counties with the highest pollution level has crime rates triple the U.S. average. Hello?
Hello.
So what I'm saying is that you have people out here that know certain things that the average person don't know about, and so they have systems at work. When Homeland Security, one of their first acts was declare pharmaceutical companies as part of the national defense, which means you can't sue them.
Yes.
And so the new flu shots that's coming out, which people who take the most is little tots and old folks, have mercury in them. Now, there's only one paper that touched on that, and that's the L.A. Times, Friday, April the 22nd, 2004. And the front page says, U.S. won't alert parents, doctors on mercury in flu shots for kids.
Yes.
And so when you stop and think about, in our wildest imagination, we could never even consider putting mercury in some shots for tots. And so that's why I say it's hard to pinpoint what they planning on doing. They know, and then I tell you something else that Cheney and his wife know, because I read a book they wrote. There's a book out about, I think it's something like the 9 powerful kings. And I said, Jesus Christ, kings. And they're talking about the speakers of the House, the 9 most powerful speakers of the House. And then they get on and touch something that just blew me away. They talked about Circumference, the Indian chief, who was murdered by William Henry Harrison.
Yes.
And before he died, this was in 1811, he said to William Henry Harrison, "You be president, and because you killed me and my people, it's called the curse of the white man. You will die, you won't finish your term out, and every president on that 0 number after you won't finish your term except one, but he'll be gravely injured. And then the election after that for the next 200 years, you belong to me." Well, 1811, they laughed at him. William Henry Harrison was president of the Indiana Territory, so they gave him control over the militia. And he led it at the battle, they'll call the Battle of Tippecanoe. And so what happened is 1811, who cares? A drunken Indian. They didn't know he was a prophet and a psychic. And William Henry Harrison became president in 1840. Caught pneumonia at the inauguration. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Next year, 1860, Lincoln didn't finish his term out. Next year, 1880, Garfield didn't finish his term out. Next year, 1900, McKinley. Next year, 1920, Harding. Next year, 1940, Roosevelt. Next year, 1960, Kennedy. Next year, 1980, just like he said. One will be missed, but he'll be gravely injured because Morris won't be in place. He said, but that next election after that for the next 200 years, that's 2000. Now, what's the odds of an election, this curse being suspended, and then come back on the year 2000, and they come out the Battle of Tippecanoe, and we got a guy running for president whose wife's first name is Tipper. Hello. And so that mumbo-jumbo stuff works.
Hold it. So, but Bush, 2000, people are always speculating that he wasn't going to finish his term.
No, but wait a minute now. Term. It didn't say you wouldn't win a second term. It just said you won't finish your term out. Okay?
Okay.
When you look at Roosevelt, look how many terms. It said you won't finish your term out. Remember now, this term ain't up yet.
Right.
Okay? Now, but the reason I'm saying that is he knows. I mean, when you read that book, they mention the curse of the white man. So I'm saying, because I'm not dumb enough to believe that I know about what's going to happen to this term, and Bush don't know, and Gore didn't know. I mean, am I that much more smarter than them?
Yes.
And so, so I think, well, I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, what was your next question?
Well, I want to talk about this upcoming election. I know it's hard to fathom what these types will necessarily do, but it seems that with all of this work around the continuity of government, and because the United States is so decentralized through technology and also so spread and developed that if there was a simultaneous attacks in Seattle, Chicago, L.A., etc., the election still can be tallied for the remaining states. And then this whole idea of continuity. I'm sorry, we have a band going off on the next studio. And so it seems that if we're talking about this continuity of government, all they're talking about is the death of the House of Representatives, which then could be appointed instead of used as through a special election through the Constitution. And it seems that all of these little pointers that they're doing is looking at the death of Congress members, just in whatever pieces that are out there. And so what do you see? How do you see this playing out? I mean, do you think that the United States is huge. Who is going to institute martial law if most of our soldiers are in Iraq? And the police forces haven't necessarily been, some of them have been trained like in L.A. How do you see it playing out?
Well, I really don't, because they have so many ways they can do it. I mean, they can blow up the Senate and Congress tomorrow and blame it on anybody they want to blame it on. I mean, if there was a large explosion in L.A. tonight, just a normal accident, the first thing everybody would think is terrorism. Anytime you got a nation that afraid, you could tell them anything you want to tell them, and they would buy it. You go out to the airport, you got people standing in line taking their shoes off like it ain't no such thing as athlete foot. Okay? I mean, when you scare people, it's amazing what you can get people to do. And so consequently, I don't know how the scenario is played out, but they have think tanks that they have sit around and they have just X amount of dry runs. Say, give me this, what happens if we do this? What happens if we do this? I tell you one thing, if we had an honest, fair election, Ralph Nader wouldn't determine it, because white folks is so scared, I'm not talking about terrorists, of the economy.
Yes.
Of all at once, they got to take care of their mama and their daddy. And all the money, do you realize enrollment in community colleges in the last 18 months have increased 42%? That's all these people that normally would have sent their children to Harvard, Yale, in Morehouse and them, they can't afford it. Why?
Yeah.
Because all of their parents who had good jobs, I'm basically talking about white folks, who had good jobs, good pension plans, those pension plans have gone out the window now. Did you ever think you see today in this great America that white folks would have to get on buses to go to Canada to get a cheap aspirin? Mm-hmm. And the medicine they buying over there cheap in here is made by the pharmaceutical companies here. And so this whole fear of having to take care of mom and dad because that good insurance they have is not good anymore, and they are mom and dad, so I just can't know. So my whole lifestyle has changed.
Right.
And so this is what's going to the polls.
Let me ask you, what is your opinion of Ralph Nader?
Well, I think they either got something on Ralph, they can flash something in his face, or they make him think they got something on him. I know Ralph. Ralph is too beautiful human being to get in the middle of something where they can steal an election and blame it on him.
Yeah.
But Ralph. I mean, here's a man that became world-renowned because he put his life on the line to say, here's something you consumers need to know. And he did it to General Motors, who wouldn't think twice of killing you.
Yes.
And so to see him acting like this, and now that he's out there, since the Democrats have said that if he's in the race, there's a possibility they can't win, which means if he get out, there's a possibility he could, then they need to go to him and say, Ralph, we're going to make you an offer you can't refuse. If you get out the race and we win, we will make you head of the FDA. Oh, God, man, I would pray for that day.
Heck yeah.
But I don't understand. I mean, they saying now that if it wasn't for Ralph Nader, Bush wouldn't have won. That's crap. They had this election already planned to steal. And the greatest steal 4 years ago was not in Florida. The greatest steal, great vote fraud, was in Chicago. The second was in Atlanta, black mayor, black police chief. The third was in Washington, D.C., black mayor, black police chief. And way down the line was Florida. And in Dade County, them black folks been voting at the same black high school. You see, in a segregated pattern, you vote in a segregated pattern.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't like them black folks was leaving Dade County, going out to the suburbs where they was running around some conservative white folks.
Right.
They was going into them black high schools in their community, and that's where the ripoff happened. And so that had gone into motion. But I've always told people, if you use your automobile, as less as you use your voting machine. And when you wasn't using it, it was in the warehouse. Well, if your automobile stayed in the warehouse as much as a voting machine, you don't determine what kind of ride you have, whoever runs that warehouse. So I used to always ask, are they tampering with them voting? And I learned in Chicago what they do. They take the back off of them, and when you come in, it's all on zero. So if Dick Gregory was running against Mayor Daley, and I was on line 4 and Daley was on line 5, if they thought I was going to get a big vote in the Hyde Park Kenwood area, that's the University of Chicago,
right?
They would open up those machines that's going to go in that area in the warehouse. They would hook a little wire around my number 4 and hook it around number 5. And every time you voted for me, it would register for Daley. So they've been doing that.
Been doing that.
And if they was doing that when it was that primitive, think what they're doing now.
Absolutely.
And so I just think, to get back to your question, that I just ask people to join me every day at 12 noon in just a prayer that the truth will come out. And that one they can't manipulate. They can manipulate computers, but they can't manipulate that universal force. We just pray that the truth will come out, because America don't deserve what's fixing to happen to them. Nobody deserves what's fixing to happen. But if we keep naive and keep believing that everybody that sees through what's happened is crazy, and you got people in the agencies that's been trying to say things and they end up dead. And so we just say to all of those who have died trying to blow the whistle, we thank you for your spirit. We thank you for, and those family members that got those lawsuits in, they know something about September 11th that they're trying to scream and say, hey, let me tell you what really happened, but nobody's listening.
Absolutely, sir. This is KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara County. On the line, Dick Gregory. His website is www.dickgregory.com. Check it out. We'll be right back. 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara County. Yeah. So on the line is Dick Gregory. We are going to go back. We just need to take a little bit more of a musical interlude, and we'll be back at it. Ask you, I mean, if the rest of the world, France, Germany, all of these countries are sitting back and watching how history is being played in the United States, and there are places right now that are fascist, places that I wouldn't want to live, in the Muslim world, down in Colombia, tragedy, what's going on there, what's going on in Africa and Sudan. Want to talk with you about that very soon, sir. But how is it that the rest of the world, in a sense, I don't know how the press is talking about the United States, in this way. But, I mean, there are places where fascism exists. And how do you see something like that coming to the United States? Because I can imagine that people... we could be living, we're living very closely under this now with our laws, but people are just going about buying their McDonald's, watching their TV, still having their dreams, and so how are people really going to get it? How does it have to be?
I think if you go back to Nazi Germany, the same thing happened. There was people trying to warn them what was going to happen, and they just could not absolutely believe. Matter of fact, there was people that told Jews. There were Jews that told Jews what was fixing to happen. And some of them Jews went and reported them to the authorities. He said, how can you be this crazy? He said, I mean, what's wrong with you? And so, consequently, most folks in the world, you see, when a plays herself out as this great democracy, you have to ask yourself a certain question. If this democracy is so good, how come we got to go all the way around the world with a ram it down people's throats?
Absolutely.
Good stuff, you don't have to. No bank have to open their doors and come out with machine guns and say, come in and rob me. They're going to do it. And so consequently, when you play yourself as this great democracy, this human rights bit, and you one of the few countries in the world that still have capital punishment, the rest of the world know what your game is.
Yes.
And so people know. There's a great book out in France called The Frightening Fraud, where scientists came together and did this research on how no plane ever hit the Pentagon.
Right. Oh, God.
And so Americans don't even know that book. And so you got countries that's talking to their intelligence, the KGB, British intelligence. They know what went down here. And so they just stand out marking time because they can look at this big old elephant fall. And then they can pick up the pieces and move with it. What they worried about is they don't know that this people who's behind it is not planning on making a mistake. There will be a mistake, and then the whole world could be in chaos. But like you mentioned, the book about the fastest growing, you take the Gaza Strip and take it all the way back out to the ocean. That's the fastest growing population on this planet, not China, not India. And the average Muslim man can have 4 wives per man, and they produce 7 babies. The average medium age in Iran is 14 years of age. Mm-hmm. Then you multiply that by 1,000 years, and somebody says, oh, Christianity's in trouble. Let's move on them now. And little ordinary Christians who go to church, they don't know this is going down. But all at once, this whole manipulation, now all at once, we switch from Iraq to Iran. They're the ones that did it. Now, when do we move on them? And that could be our October surprise.
How interesting is that? Let's really, really switch gears for a second here. When we talk about the Hubble telescope, they're talking about decommissioning that. Do you think instead they might just take that? I'm really just going off somewhere because I can do that with you. Do you think possibly that they could take that black and because of what they're seeing going on in our solar system?
Oh, first, what did they tell us is wrong with the Hubble telescope?
They said it was too expensive to repair, that they don't want to
they said that. But, I mean, they lied to us about stuff right here on the planet. What do you think? We don't even know I mean, they liable to be seeing some creature out there with 27 feet. They're not going to tell us that. And so consequently, when you got a government that lies and it's devious, it's like you have a little child that just lie all the time. You don't know when to trust them. I mean, you don't hate them. That's your child. But you don't know when they're telling the truth and when they're not. America's the same way. So I figure that if we got all this stuff up there, if they lie to us, do you realize we blasting in outer space every day? But the only ones they tell you about is the ones they want to tell you about. And so kind of we hear people say, I heard this loud blast and I saw this, there we go again. And so we don't know what they got planned. We don't know what they found on Mars or what they're doing. But I know one thing, if they can blast off a spacecraft and 10 years later it's going to rendezvous at a certain time, at a certain place and take pictures, if you got the power to do that, then don't tell me you can't catch Bin Laden.
Let me ask you this. We have around 5 minutes left, and I want to hear about your protest activities around the Sudan.
Well, I went to jail earlier today. Every day, Congressman Rangel went to jail. There are Congress folk coming out every day going to jail. Every day, someone goes before the Sudanese embassy here, and it's nice. There's no hostility. It's a deal that's been made with the Secret Service. We go up to the door. They ask us 3 times to leave. And when we don't leave, they arrest us. You pay $50 and you're out. This coming Thursday, they're going to have what they call a die-in across the street from the White House in the park there, the closest you can get now. And they're asking for 1,000 people to come out. And then they'll just lay down like this. And that represents the massive people in the Sudan that will die in the next 3 weeks if food is not carried to them. So my thing is twofold. There's a vicious thing happening with the government who sponsors the militants who's killing. Those are Arabs killing the Africans because there's huge amounts of oil in that area, more oil than Saudi Arabia. But there's ethnic cleansing and all. Well, they've killed tens of thousands, but there's millions of people that's about to die in refugee camps.
Absolutely.
And so consequently, my first thing now is not the ones that's dead, but how quick can the world community get food in there before the floods and the rainy season start?
How is it, though, that it gets to this crisis point? Obviously, this has been going on for such a, for such a long time, and
just
the
UN in blackness, and who cares?
And aren't there, what I understand is that these Arabs go through with machetes on horseback and just sit there and say, filthy African pigs, whatever, and is this...
Tens of thousands of women have been raped from 8-year-old children, and the whole world just looks the other way.
And now these are Arabs that are hired by Africans to come and kill their own people?
No. The Sudanese, that's an Arab country. That's having that. And they run in the African.
How did it become an Arab country?
Well, how did India become part of Pakistan? They just, colonialism, they just redrew the line.
So is there, in a sense, Arab expansionism?
Yes. And that's been going on for years. I mean, the slave trade, have been happening for so long, but you wouldn't think this could happen at this day and age. At all, and not only just the starvation, the disease, and all the implications of what this means.
And where is the peace movement? How come the peace movement? We can talk about Colombia, Venezuela, and all this stuff. Where is it for Africa? For this kind of just what Rwanda is still in our memory, and I just don't get it. I don't know how we can have this off our telescope. I heard the very same thing was going on in Algeria.
Yes. Well, you factor in this whole black lane, and there's a different, and even black folks, they put more value on white than they do on black. I mean, I can go to a black church on Sunday and walk in there and there's a white Jesus, but when I go to China to the Christian community, Jesus look Chinese, Japan, Jesus in the Christian community, Jesus look a little Japanese. I don't have no problem with Jesus staying the same color all over the world, but when Jesus is going to change colors and look like the people of that land, and I want one to look like me.
Yes. Our time has absolutely blazed by, as always, sir.